I'm Margaret Wilson, 68 years old, with silver hair and memories that weigh heavier than my years. On Mother's Day morning, my son Eric handed me a gift bag. Inside was a DNA test and a note. "You're not my mother." Before I could speak, he said, "You think I should be grateful? I owe you nothing." I froze. He watched for tears. Instead, I laughed and said, "I've been waiting for you to find out." He stared at me, stunned. I had kept the real truth locked away for 23 years. Until now. If you're watching this from somewhere with a similar family secret, hit subscribe and stay with me. This story might just help you understand that truth can be both devastating and healing. Before that fateful Mother's Day, my life seemed perfect on the surface. I lived in a beautiful colonial-style home in a quiet Connecticut suburb with manicured lawns and friendly neighbors who waved as they walked their dogs. My husband Harold was a successful investment banker who provided us with financial security and stability. I had been a pediatric nurse for 12 years before Eric was born, but I chose to give up my career to focus on raising him. It was a decision I never regretted. Our home was filled with photographs documenting Eric's life. His first steps in our backyard, Halloween costumes I'd sewn myself, his high school graduation where he gave the valedictorian speech. I'd created elaborate photo albums for each year of his life, something he used to tease me about but secretly appreciated. At least that's what I believed. Eric was our pride and joy, a brilliant boy with sandy blonde hair and intense blue eyes that could pierce right through you. From an early age, he showed exceptional intelligence, reading fluently by age 4 and solving complex math problems by 3rd grade. His teachers constantly told us he was gifted. Beyond academics, he excelled in swimming and track, bringing home trophies that Harold proudly displayed in our living room. I supported Eric in everything he did. I attended every swim meet, sitting in chlorine-scented natatoriums for hours just to cheer for his few minutes in the water. I helped him prepare for debate competitions, acting as his practice opponent even when I barely understood the topics. When he developed an interest in astronomy, I drove him to dark rural areas at midnight, so he could photograph constellations with the expensive camera we'd bought him for his 16th birthday. Our relationship had always been close. Throughout his childhood and teenage years, Eric would come to me with his problems before anyone else. I was the one he called when he got into his dream college, Princeton University, and I was the one who helped him move into his dorm, arranging his belongings exactly how he liked them while fighting back tears. But something began to change during his junior year of college. His phone calls became less frequent, his texts shorter and more perfunctory. When he came home for breaks, he spent more time with his friends than with Harold and me. At first, I attributed it to normal young adult independence. He was 22 after all. It was natural for him to pull away. During his Christmas break of senior year, just 5 months before that Mother's Day, I noticed something more troubling than simple independence. There was a coldness in his interactions with me, a barely concealed resentment that seemed to come from nowhere. He would flinch slightly when I touched his shoulder. He would answer my questions with curt, one-word responses. When I asked if something was bothering him, he would say, "I'm fine," in a tone that clearly indicated he wasn't. Harold noticed it too. "Give him space," he advised. "Boys his age need to establish their own identity." But I knew my son. This wasn't normal separation. This was something deeper. Eric had made new friends at Princeton, particularly a roommate named Nolan who came from a wealthy New York family. Whenever Eric mentioned Nolan, there was a note of admiration in his voice that bordered on reverence. During spring break, Eric chose to go to Nolan's family's beach house in the Hamptons rather than come home. It was the first major holiday he hadn't spent with us. I tried reaching out more frequently, sending care packages to his dorm and suggesting weekend visits to campus. My efforts were met with excuses. He was too busy with thesis work, he had research commitments, his schedule was packed with job interviews. Each rejection stung, but I persisted. I was his mother. I couldn't give up on him. 2 weeks before Mother's Day, I called one of Eric's childhood friends, Jason, hoping for some insight. Jason had attended a state university but still kept in touch with Eric. "Has Eric mentioned anything about us?" I asked after some small talk. "He seems different lately." There was an uncomfortable pause before Jason answered. I haven't talked to him much this semester, Mrs. Wilson. He's been pretty wrapped up in his new friend group. Something in his tone made me press further. Has he said anything specific about me? Another pause. I really shouldn't get involved, Mrs. Wilson. Maybe you should talk to Eric directly. That conversation left me with a gnawing feeling that someone had told Eric something. Something that had changed his perception of me. I spent the next 2 weeks anxiously waiting for Mother's Day, hoping it would provide an opportunity for reconnection. Instead, it brought the confrontation that would unravel 23 years of carefully constructed reality. As I moved through those final days before Mother's Day, I had no idea that the perfect life I had built was about to shatter. The comfortable routines, the family dinners when Eric was home, the identity I had constructed as the devoted mother. All of it was balanced on a foundation of secrets that was about to collapse beneath me. Mother's Day dawned bright and clear that Sunday in May. I woke early, eager to prepare a special breakfast for when Eric arrived. He had texted the night before that he would drive down from Princeton for the day, arriving around 10 in the morning. Harold helped me in the kitchen, squeezing fresh orange juice while I prepared a blueberry French toast casserole, Eric's favorite since childhood. He'll come around, Harold assured me as I fretted over the table setting. Whatever's bothering him, we'll work through it as a family. I nodded, wanting desperately to believe him. I'd set the dining room table with my best china and fresh flowers from our garden. The silver coffee service that had belonged to Harold's mother gleamed in the morning light. Everything needed to be perfect. 10 o'clock came and went with no sign of Eric. By 11 I had texted him twice and called once with no response. Harold tried to distract me with small talk about neighbors and garden plans, but I could see the concern in his eyes as well. At 11:38, I remember checking the ornate grandfather clock in our hallway. We heard the crunch of tires on our gravel driveway. Through the window I saw Eric's silver Audi, a graduation gift from Harold, pull up to the house. He sat in the car for nearly 2 minutes before finally emerging. Even from a distance I could see the tension in his posture, the deliberate slowness of his movements as he retrieved a small bag from the passenger seat. "He's here," I said unnecessarily to Harold, my voice betraying my nervousness. We waited in the foyer. When Eric entered, he didn't immediately look at either of us. He was dressed in dark jeans and a Princeton sweatshirt, his hair slightly longer than when I'd last seen him at Easter. He had lost weight, I noticed, and there were shadows under his eyes suggesting he hadn't been sleeping well. "Happy Mother's Day," he said finally, his voice flat. There was no hug, no kiss on the cheek as had been our tradition for years. "Thank you, sweetheart," I replied, trying to keep my tone light. "We have breakfast ready. Your favorite French toast casserole." "I already ate," he said. Then he extended the small gift bag toward me. It was plain white, with no decoration or card attached. "This is for you." Harold placed his hand on my back, a gesture of support as I accepted the bag. "Why don't we sit in the living room?" he suggested. Eric nodded stiffly and followed us in. He remained standing while Harold and I sat on the sofa. The atmosphere was so thick with tension I felt I could barely breathe. I opened the gift bag and removed the tissue paper. Inside was a small box from a company called Family DNA. It was a home DNA testing kit. Underneath it was a folded piece of paper. With trembling fingers, I opened it to find 5 words written in Eric's neat handwriting. "You're not my mother." I looked up at Eric, confusion and shock rendering me momentarily speechless. His face was a mask of controlled anger, his blue eyes, so like my sister's, cold and challenging. "Eric," Harold began, his voice steady but strained, "what is the meaning of this?" "Ask her," Eric replied, never taking his eyes off me. "Ask your wife about the lies she's been telling for 23 years. I found my voice at last. "Eric, please sit down. We should talk about this." "Talk about what?" he said, his voice rising. "About how my entire life has been a lie. About how the woman I called Mom isn't even related to me." He took a step closer, his hands clenched at his sides. "You think I should be grateful to you? That I owe you something for taking me in? Well, I don't. I owe you nothing." I felt the blood drain from my face as I realized what was happening. Somehow, Eric had discovered he was adopted. But he clearly didn't know the whole truth. He was waiting for me to cry, to beg for forgiveness, to crumble under the weight of his accusation. Instead, a strange sense of relief washed over me. The secret I had carried for so long was finally out in the open. I laughed. It wasn't a joyful sound, but rather the release of decades of tension. "I've been waiting for you to find out," I said quietly. Eric stared at me, his expression transforming from anger to confusion. "What? How did you find out?" I asked, setting the DNA kit aside. His jaw tightened. "Does it matter? I know the truth now." "It does matter," I insisted. "Because you don't know the whole truth, Eric. I was at a campus alumni event last month," he said after a long pause. "Barbara and Tom Williams were there visiting their daughter. They recognized me." He swallowed hard. "They'd had too much wine and started talking about how amazing it was that you and Dad had kept the adoption secret for so long. How it was a blessing that you could give a home to poor Diana's baby." Harold moved to speak, but I placed my hand on his arm, stopping him. This was my story to tell. "Who is Diana?" Eric demanded. "My real mother?" "Yes," I said simply. "Diana was your biological mother. And you never thought I deserved to know this?" His voice cracked slightly. 23 years of lies? It wasn't that simple, Eric. "It seems pretty simple to me. You and Dad couldn't have children, so you adopted me and pretended I was yours. You even faked a pregnancy, didn't you? That's why we moved here from Boston when I was a baby. So no one would know the truth." I took a deep breath. "There's more to the story than you know, Eric. Much more. And if you're willing to listen, I'll tell you everything." "Why should I believe anything you say now?" he challenged. "Because despite what you think, I have never stopped being your mother," I replied. "And mothers protect their children, sometimes in ways that are hard to understand." Eric stood frozen for a moment, conflict evident in his expression. Then he grabbed his car keys from his pocket. "I need some air. I can't do this right now." "Eric, please," Harold said, standing up. "Don't leave like this." "I'll be back," he said, already moving toward the door. I need time to think." The front door slammed behind him, leaving Harold and me sitting in silence, the untouched Mother's Day breakfast growing cold in the dining room. The carefully constructed life we had built was crumbling around us, and I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. Eric returned 3 hours later. I had spent that time alternating between pacing the house and sitting motionless, staring at family photographs that now seemed like artifacts from someone else's life. Harold had called Eric repeatedly, leaving increasingly concerned voicemails that went unanswered. When we heard his car in the driveway, we both rushed to the window. He sat in the vehicle for several minutes, head resting on the steering wheel, before finally emerging and walking slowly to the house. This time when he entered, his anger had subsided into something more complicated. A mixture of hurt, confusion, and exhaustion. Without a word, he went to the living room and sat in the armchair across from the sofa, creating physical distance between us. "I'm ready to hear what you have to say," he said finally. I nodded, perching on the edge of the sofa while Harold took his place beside me. "Yes, Eric," I began. "I am not your biological mother. Your father and I adopted you when you were a newborn." "So I was right," he said, a hint of vindication in his voice. "About that part, yes," I acknowledged. "We did adopt you legally, though not through traditional channels." "What does that mean?" Harold leaned forward. "It means we didn't go through an adoption agency. It was a private arrangement." Eric's eyes narrowed. "With this Diana person? The woman Barbara mentioned?" I nodded. "Diana was your birth mother. She gave you to us willingly, Eric. She wanted us to raise you. And you never thought I deserved to know about her?" The accusation hung heavy in the air. "We made a decision that we thought was in your best interest," I said carefully. "It may have been wrong, but our intentions were good." "So you lied to everyone," Eric said. "You pretended to be pregnant." "Yes," I admitted. "I wore padding under my clothes for months. We told everyone I was having a difficult pregnancy and needed to rest. Then we moved from Boston to Connecticut, where no one knew us, shortly after you were born." "The story about my birth? The one you've told 1,000 times about how I was 2 weeks late, And you were in labor for 19 hours. I winced at the bitterness in his tone. That was fabricated, yes. And my birth certificate? It lists you and Dad as my biological parents. Harold cleared his throat uncomfortably. I had connections in the legal system. Strings were pulled to create a new birth certificate. Eric stared at his father in disbelief. That's illegal. It is, Harold admitted. But at the time, we believed we were doing what was best for you. We wanted you to feel secure, to never question whether you belonged with us. Did you ever plan to tell me? Eric asked, his voice softer now. I exchanged a glance with Harold before answering. No, I said honestly. The agreement with Diana was that you would never know. We promised her. So if Barbara hadn't let it slip, I would have gone my whole life not knowing the truth? Eric shook his head in disgust. Do you have any idea what this feels like? To suddenly discover your entire identity is based on a lie. Eric, I said gently, being adopted doesn't change who you are. Doesn't it? He challenged. My medical history, my heritage, my genetic traits, everything I thought I knew about myself is wrong. I've spent my life thinking I inherited Dad's analytical mind and your artistic sensibility. I believed those stories about how I got Grandpa Wilson's height and Grandma Clark's blue eyes. His voice broke. None of that was true. The love was true, Harold said firmly. Everything we've done for you, every sacrifice we've made, every proud moment we've shared, that was all real. Eric stood abruptly, pacing the room. I don't even know who I am anymore. My name? Is Eric even my real name? Diana named you Eric, I said. We kept the name she chose. He stopped pacing. What was her last name? What's my real last name? I hesitated. Clark. Diana Clark. Eric froze. Clark? Like your maiden name? And there it was, the opening to the complete truth. But I wasn't ready to reveal everything, not when Eric was already so overwhelmed. It's a common name, I said, the lie bitter on my tongue. I want to know about her, Eric demanded. Who was she? Where did she come from? Why did she give me up? And what about my biological father? Diana was young when she had you, I said carefully. She wasn't in a position to raise a child. She wanted you to have a better life than she could provide. That's not an answer, Eric said. I want details. Was she a teenager? A drug addict? What? She was 22, I replied. She wasn't a drug addict or anything like that. She was just struggling. And my biological father? He wasn't in the picture, Harold interjected. Diana was alone when she approached us. Eric ran his hands through his hair in frustration. This is insane. 23 years of lies, and you're still being vague and evasive. He grabbed his keys again. I need more time. And when I come back, I want the whole truth. Names, dates, documentation. Everything. Where are you going? I asked, rising to my feet. To a hotel. I can't stay here tonight. Eric, please, Harold began, but our son cut him off. I'll be in touch, he said, already moving toward the door. But right now, I can't even look at either of you. As the door closed behind him, I collapsed onto the sofa, the weight of decades of deception crushing down on me. Harold put his arm around my shoulders. We should have told him everything, he said quietly. Not yet, I replied. He's not ready for the whole truth. Neither am I. But I knew the time for complete honesty was approaching, and with it would come the most painful revelation of all, one that would either bring Eric back to me or drive him away forever. After Eric left, the house fell into a silence so profound I could hear the antique grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, marking seconds that stretched into eternity. Harold retreated to his study, burying himself in work as he always did in times of emotional stress. I found myself standing in Eric's childhood bedroom, untouched since he left for college except for my weekly dusting. The walls were still adorned with his swimming medals and academic awards. A shelf held model airplanes we had built together on rainy Sundays. His Princeton acceptance letter was framed on the desk. Every object in this room told the story of our life together. The life that now felt like an elaborate fiction. I sat on the edge of his bed and pulled a leather-bound photo album from the bottom shelf of his bookcase. It wasn't one of the family albums I had meticulously created over the years. This one was private, hidden from Eric his entire life. Opening it released the scent of old paper and faded perfume. Diana's perfume. Lilacs. She always smelled of lilacs. The first photograph showed a teenage girl with long blonde hair and striking blue eyes, the same eyes that had looked at me with such betrayal just hours earlier. Diana at 16, laughing at something beyond the camera's frame. My baby sister 8 years younger than me, full of life and mischief. I traced the outline of her face with my fingertip, memories flooding back with painful clarity. Diana had been the wild one in our family. While I followed rules and met expectations, good grades, nursing school, engagement to Harold by 22, Diana rebelled at every turn. She skipped classes, snuck out at night, dated boys our parents disapproved of. But beneath her defiance was a brilliant, creative spirit. She could play piano by ear, write poetry that brought tears to my eyes, and charm anyone with her quick wit and genuine warmth. Our parents never understood her. They saw only the broken curfews and disappointing report cards. I became her protector, her confidant, the buffer between Diana and our parents' disappointment. When they died in a car accident during Diana's senior year of high school, I became her legal guardian at 25, already married to Harold and working as a pediatric nurse. For a while, Diana seemed to stabilize. She enrolled in community college, worked part-time at a bookstore, and lived in our guest room. Harold was patient with her, understanding my devotion to my only sibling. But during her second year of college, Diana met Julian, a charming musician with a dangerous edge. Within months, she had dropped out of school and moved in with him. I flipped through more photographs. Diana at 20, thin and pale but still beautiful. Diana and me at Christmas, the last holiday we spent together before everything fell apart. Diana playing guitar in a small club, Julian barely visible in the background. Julian introduced Diana to a faster lifestyle: parties, alcohol, and eventually drugs. Not the addiction I had denied to Eric, but recreational use that gradually increased. When Julian's band secured a record deal and began touring, Diana followed, dropping in and out of our lives unpredictably. Each time she returned, she seemed a little more lost, a little further from the vibrant girl she had once been. Then came the night that changed everything. A rainy April evening 23 years ago. I was working the late shift at the hospital when Diana appeared in the emergency room, soaking wet, with a small duffel bag and tears streaming down her face. "I'm pregnant," she told me, her voice barely audible above the hospital noise. "For months. Julian doesn't want it. He said to get rid of it or get out." I took her home, dried her tears, and helped her into dry clothes. Harold made hot chocolate while Diana explained her situation. Julian had kicked her out when she refused to terminate the pregnancy. She had nowhere to go, no money, and no plan. "I want to keep the baby," she insisted, hands protectively covering her slightly rounded abdomen. "But I don't know how." Harold and I had been trying to conceive for 3 years without success. We had just begun discussing adoption options when Diana appeared on our doorstep like an answer to an unspoken prayer. Over the following months, as Diana's belly grew, so did our plan. She would stay with us until the birth. Harold and I would adopt the baby and raise it as our own. Diana would be free to pursue her dreams without the burden of single parenthood. "You'll be wonderful parents," Diana told us. "Better than I could ever be." But there was a condition. One that Diana insisted upon and that we reluctantly accepted. Her child would never know about her. There would be no contact, no relationship, no knowledge of her existence. "A clean break is better," she argued. "I don't want my child growing up confused, wondering why their mother keeps drifting in and out of their life. I've seen what that does to kids." I disagreed vehemently. "Your child deserves to know you, Diana. And you'll regret this decision. Promise me, Margaret," she insisted. "Promise me you'll never tell." Against my better judgment, I promised. Harold used his connections to arrange a private adoption and new birth certificate. We created the story of my difficult pregnancy and planned our move to Connecticut. Everything was in place for our new beginning. Eric was born on September 12th. A healthy, beautiful boy with Diana's blue eyes and a dusting of blonde hair. I was in the delivery room, the first person to hold him after the doctor. Diana kissed his forehead once before turning away, tears streaming down her face. "Take good care of him," she whispered to me. "Tell him he was loved. Just not by who." 2 days later, Diana checked out of the hospital and disappeared from our lives. She left a letter for Eric to be opened on his 18th birthday. A letter I had hidden away when the time came, honoring my promise despite my misgivings. For 2 years we heard nothing. Harold, Eric, and I settled into our new home and new identities. I threw myself into motherhood, cherishing every moment with the child who was biologically my nephew, but who I loved as my own son. Then came the phone call that shattered my world for the second time. Diana had been killed in a car accident in California. She was alone, no identification except an old driver's license. Among her few possessions was a photograph of Eric as a newborn, and my phone number. I organized a small, private funeral. Julian didn't attend. Neither did the few friends Diana had maintained. It was just Harold, baby Eric, and me, standing beside a plain casket in the pouring rain. At that moment I made another promise, to visit Diana's grave every year on Eric's birthday, to maintain that connection even if my son could not. For 21 years I had kept both promises, never telling Eric about Diana, and never forgetting her myself. Each September 12th I would make an excuse to be alone for a few hours. I would drive to the small cemetery where Diana was buried, bring lilacs if they were available, and tell her about her son's accomplishments, his growing height, his developing personality. I closed the album and returned it to its hiding place. Tomorrow I would need to decide how much of this truth to share with Eric. The partial revelation had already shaken him to his core. Would the complete truth, that I was his biological aunt, that his mother had been my beloved sister, that he had been living alongside his biological family his entire life without knowing it, bring healing or cause irreparable damage? As darkness fell outside Eric's bedroom window, I made my decision. It was time for the secrets to end. Whatever the consequences, my son deserved to know who he truly was, and who had truly loved him all along. A week passed with no word from Eric. My calls went to voicemail, my texts unanswered. Harold tried reaching out as well with the same result. I moved through the days in a fog, going through the motions of normal life while feeling as though I was standing on the edge of an abyss. Finally, on the 8th day after Mother's Day, Harold received a brief text. "I'm okay. Need time. We'll be in touch soon." "At least we know he's safe," Harold said, showing me the message over breakfast. "That's something." I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. The waiting was unbearable, but I understood Eric's need for space. His entire identity had been called into question. He needed time to process before facing us again. While Eric maintained his distance, I began preparing for the inevitable confrontation. I retrieved Diana's letters from the fireproof safe in our basement. Not just the one intended for Eric's 18th birthday, but all the ones she had written to me during her brief disappearances over the years. I gathered photographs of Diana from childhood through adulthood. I found the few possessions of hers I had kept. A silver bracelet, her favorite book of poetry, the small stuffed rabbit she had bought for her unborn child. I also decided to find Barbara and Tom Williams, the unwitting catalysts of our family crisis. It took some detective work and several phone calls to mutual acquaintances, but I eventually obtained their current address in a retirement community about 40 minutes from our home. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" Harold asked when I told him my plan to visit them. "What will it accomplish?" "I need to know exactly what they told Eric," I explained, "and how they knew about the adoption in the first place. We were so careful." The following day, I drove to Oakwood Retirement Village, a pleasant complex of condominiums surrounded by carefully landscaped gardens. Barbara and Tom welcomed me into their home with obvious discomfort, clearly aware of why I had come. "Margaret," Barbara began as soon as we were seated in their living room, "we are so terribly sorry. We had no idea Eric didn't know he was adopted." "What exactly did you tell him?" I asked, declining their offer of tea. Tom shifted uncomfortably in his armchair. "It was at a Princeton alumni event. Our daughter Sophia graduated a few years ago, and we still attend some functions. We saw Eric across the room and couldn't believe how much he'd grown. We'd had a few glasses of wine," Barbara admitted, her cheeks flushing. "We went to congratulate him on his upcoming graduation. One thing led to another. And I mentioned how wonderful it was that you and Harold had provided such a loving home for him. I think my exact words were something about the blessing of adoption, Tom added. Eric looked completely shocked. When we realized he didn't know, we tried to backtrack, but the damage was done. Then I made it worse, Barbara said, eyes downcast. I mentioned Diana by name. I said something about her baby finding a good home with her sister. Eric excused himself immediately after that. I felt the blood drain from my face. You told him Diana was my sister? Barbara looked confused. Well, yes. Wasn't she? How did you know about the adoption? About Diana? I pressed, ignoring her question. We never told anyone in Connecticut. The elderly couple exchanged glances. We knew Diana in Boston, Tom explained. I was her professor for 2 semesters at the community college. When she dropped out, she told me she was pregnant and that her sister would be adopting the baby. We ran into you once at the hospital, Barbara added. You were visiting Diana. She introduced you as her sister who would be adopting her baby. We promised to keep it confidential. Then we moved to New York for Tom's new teaching position, she continued. We lost touch with everyone in Boston. Years later, we met you and Harold at a neighborhood barbecue after you moved to Connecticut. We recognized you immediately but respected your privacy. We never mentioned knowing about the adoption. Until that night at Princeton, I said quietly. Until that night, Tom confirmed, shame evident in his expression. We are truly sorry, Margaret. The wine, the excitement of seeing Eric all grown up. It was a terrible mistake. I left the Williams condo with my mind reeling. Not only had Eric discovered he was adopted, but he also knew Diana was my sister. Yet he hadn't confronted me with this information during our conversation. Why? The answer came 3 days later in the form of a text message from an unknown number. DNA results came back. Confused. We share DNA? Call me. My hands trembled as I dialed the number. Eric answered on the first ring. The test shows we're related, he said without preamble. It says we share approximately 25% of our DNA. That would make you your aunt, I finished for him. Yes, Eric. Diana was my younger sister. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Eric spoke, his voice tight with controlled emotion. I'm coming over tomorrow at noon. I want to see everything you have about her. Every photograph, every letter, every piece of information. No more half-truths. No more evasions. I'll be ready, I promised. Everything will be waiting for you. After we hung up, I called Harold at his office. Eric's coming tomorrow. He knows Diana was my sister. How? Harold asked, shocked. The DNA test, I explained. And apparently Barbara and Tom told him more than we realized. It's time for complete honesty, Harold. No more secrets. That night, I carefully arranged all of Diana's belongings on the dining room table. The photo album. The stack of letters tied with faded ribbon. The small jewelry box containing her bracelet and the necklace she wore every day. Her favorite books. The stuffed rabbit, slightly worn from the few times I had allowed myself to hold it over the years. Tomorrow my son would discover his true identity. Not just as an adopted child, but as my sister's son, my blood relative, a young man with a complex heritage of love, loss, and difficult choices. I could only hope that the truth, however painful, would finally set us all free. At precisely noon the next day, Eric's car pulled into our driveway. I watched from the living room window as he sat motionless behind the wheel for several minutes, seemingly gathering his courage. When he finally approached the house, his stride was purposeful, shoulders squared as if preparing for battle. Harold opened the door before Eric could knock. "Thank you for coming, son," he said, stepping aside to let Eric enter. Eric nodded stiffly but didn't respond. His gaze immediately found me standing in the archway between the foyer and living room. His eyes were red-rimmed from lack of sleep, his normally clean-shaven face showing several days' worth of stubble. "I want to see everything," he said without preamble. "It's all in the dining room," I replied, leading the way. Eric stopped short when he saw the display on the table. The careful arrangement of photographs, letters, and mementos seemed to momentarily overwhelm him. He approached slowly, as if the items might disappear if he moved too quickly. "Sit down," I said gently. "This will take some time." Eric pulled out a chair and sat, his eyes fixed on the photo album at the center of the table. I took the seat opposite him while Harold positioned himself at the end of the table, present but giving us space for what was primarily our story to share. Diana Clark was my younger sister, I began, opening the album to the first page. She was born when I was 8 years old. These are photos of us growing up. Eric leaned forward, studying the images of two girls. One with straight brown hair and serious eyes, me. The other with wild blonde curls and a mischievous smile, Diana. As I turned the pages, he watched his biological mother grow from a gap-toothed child to a beautiful teenager. "You have her eyes," I said softly. "Exactly the same blue. And her smile." Eric's hand hovered over a photograph of Diana at 17, playing guitar on our parents' front porch. The resemblance was undeniable. Same shaped face. Same slight dimple in the left cheek. Same way of tilting the head when concentrating. "Our parents died in a car accident when Diana was 17, I continued. I was 25, married to Harold, and working as a nurse. I became her legal guardian. My grandparents, Eric said, his first words since sitting down. They died before I was born. Yes, I confirmed. Diana lived with Harold and me for a while after their deaths. She was creative, brilliant, but troubled. She struggled with their loss in ways I didn't understand at the time. I showed him more photographs. Diana graduating high school, Diana and me at Christmas, Diana with her arm around a thin young man with long dark hair. Julian Reeves, I explained. A musician she met when she was 20. Your biological father. Eric stared at the man's face, searching for resemblances. What was he like? Harold cleared his throat. Charming on the surface. Selfish underneath. He had talent as a guitarist but not enough to justify his ego. Diana was captivated by him, I added. She dropped out of college to follow his band. When she became pregnant with you, he gave her an ultimatum. Terminate the pregnancy or leave. She chose me, Eric said quietly. Without hesitation, I confirmed. She showed up at the hospital where I worked, for months pregnant and homeless. We took her in immediately. I reached for the stack of letters. Over the next 5 months, we developed a plan. Harold and I had been trying to have a child for years without success. Diana needed support and stability that she couldn't provide while raising a child alone. So you adopted me, Eric said. But why the secrecy? Why create this elaborate fiction that you were my biological mother? I handed him the top letter from the stack. This might help explain. Diana wrote this while she was living with us, waiting for you to be born. Eric unfolded the yellowed paper carefully. Diana's handwriting flowed across the page in artistic swoops and curves. Dear Margaret and Harold, asterisk. I've been thinking about our arrangement, and I need to make one thing absolutely clear. When this baby is born, he or she will be your child, not mine. I don't want yearly visits or birthday cards or any reminder that I gave birth to a child I couldn't keep. Asterisk. This isn't about me not caring. It's about me caring too much. I know myself too well. I know my patterns. I'll drift in and out of this child's life, causing confusion and pain. I've seen what that does to kids. I refuse to be the source of that kind of hurt. Asterisk. So I'm insisting that when I leave after the birth, it's a complete break. The baby should never know about me. Create whatever story you need to. Move away. Start fresh. Be the parents I can't be. Asterisk. This is my gift to both of you and to my child. A clean slate. No complications. No painful explanations about a mother who wasn't mature enough or stable enough to raise her own baby. Asterisk. I love you both for doing this. Please respect my wishes. Asterisk. Diana asterisk. Eric read the letter twice, his expression unreadable. She didn't want me to know about her. That's what she said, I replied carefully. But I disagreed with her decision. I thought you had a right to know your biological mother, to understand your heritage. We argued about it throughout her pregnancy. But you honored her wishes anyway, Eric said, a hint of accusation in his tone. Yes, I admitted. And it was the most difficult promise I've ever kept. I handed him another letter, this one sealed in an envelope with "For Eric, 18th birthday" written on the front. Diana wrote this for you before she left the hospital after your birth. She wanted you to have it when you turned 18. But you never gave it to me, Eric said, taking the envelope. No, ella no la ja. I broke my promise to her in that regard. I was still honoring her wish for you not to know about her. Eric stared at the envelope for a long moment before carefully opening it and removing the letter inside. As he read, tears began to form in his eyes. My dearest Eric, or Erica if you're a girl, we don't know yet. Asterisk. By the time you read this, you'll be 18 years old. An adult. Ready to make your own decisions and form your own opinions. I hope one of those opinions isn't to hate me for giving you up. Asterisk. I want you to know that it wasn't because I didn't love you. From the first moment I felt you move inside me, I loved you more than I thought possible. But love isn't always enough. Sometimes the most loving choice is to recognize your own limitations and put someone else's needs before your desires. Asterisk. Your Aunt Margaret, your mom now, and Uncle Harold, your dad, wanted a child so desperately. They had a stable home, financial security, and more love to give than I could even comprehend. Had, well, not much. No job, no home, no plan. Just a history of poor choices and a tendency to run when things got difficult. Asterisk. I chose them to raise you because I knew they would give you everything I couldn't. Structure, stability, unconditional love. The kind of childhood every kid deserves. Asterisk. I asked them never to tell you about me. If they've honored that request and you're reading this now, please don't be angry with them. The decision was mine alone. I thought a clean break would be easier for everyone, especially you. Asterisk. I hope your life has been filled with joy, laughter, and achievements. I hope you felt secure in your parents' love. I hope you've never had reason to wonder about the circumstances of your birth or feel that you were unwanted. You were wanted, Eric. So very much. Just not by someone equipped to be the mother you deserved. Asterisk. Perhaps someday we'll meet again, though I haven't made that easy. Know that whatever path your life has taken, a part of me has always been with you, loving you from afar. Asterisk. Your birth mother, asterisk. Diana, asterisk. Eric wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. When did she die? He asked, his voice barely audible. The question hit me like a physical blow. 2 years after you were born. A car accident in California. She was alone. I slid a newspaper clipping across the table. Diana's obituary, brief and impersonal. We held a small funeral. Just Harold, you and me. You were too young to remember. Eric's eyes widened. I was there. Yes, I said. I wanted you to have at least that one moment with her. Even if you wouldn't remember it. Did she ever try to contact us during those 2 years? Eric asked. No, I admitted. She kept her promise to stay away completely. But she left something for you when she died. I handed him the small stuffed rabbit, worn soft with age. This was found among her possessions, along with your newborn photo and my phone number. She had bought it for you while she was pregnant. I've kept it all these years. Eric took the rabbit, turning it over in his hands. A small tag on its ear read, "For my little one, love always." So let me understand this completely, he said after a long silence. Diana was your sister. She got pregnant by this Julian guy, who wanted nothing to do with the baby. You and Dad adopted me at birth. Diana requested complete secrecy about her identity. 2 years later, she died alone in California. And you've kept this secret for 23 years, honoring her wishes even though you disagreed with them. That's correct, I confirmed. And my birth certificate? The stories about your pregnancy? The move to Connecticut? All that was to maintain the fiction that I was your biological son. Harold nodded. We created a new identity for all of us. The only people who knew the truth were Barbara and Tom Williams, and they only knew parts of it from their brief interactions with Diana. Eric stood abruptly, pacing the dining room. This is a lot to process. My biological mother was your sister, which makes you not just my adoptive mother but my biological aunt. All these years, I've actually been living with blood relatives without knowing it. Yes, I said simply. And my father? Julian. Did you try to contact him when Diana died? Harold's expression hardened. We tried. His band had broken up by then. He had moved on to other projects. When we finally reached him by phone and told him about Diana's death, he expressed condolences but no interest in you. He knew about me? Yes, I said gently. He knew Diana was pregnant when he told her to leave, and he knew she had given you to us to raise. When we told him about her death, we asked if he wanted any contact with you. He declined. Eric stopped pacing, his face flushed with anger. So he just abandoned both of us? His pregnant girlfriend and his unborn child. I'm afraid so, Harold confirmed. Not every man is prepared to accept the responsibility of fatherhood. Julian certainly wasn't. Eric slammed his hand down on the table, making the photographs jump. Coward, he spat. Then more softly. At least Diana had a reason. She thought she was doing what was best for me. What was his excuse? Selfishness, I said simply. His career came first. Everything else was secondary. Eric returned to his chair, emotionally exhausted. I don't know how to feel about any of this. Part of me is angry that you kept this from me for so long. Another part understands why you did it. He looked at the photograph of Diana. And part of me wishes I could have known her, even briefly. I wish that too, I admitted. She was flawed, impulsive, sometimes irresponsible. But she was also loving, creative, and brave in her own way. She made the most selfless decision of her life when it came to you. Do I have other biological relatives? Grandparents? Aunts or uncles on Julian's side? Diana's parents, your biological grandparents, are both deceased, as I mentioned. She was an only child until I was born, so I'm your only aunt on that side. As for Julian's family, we have very little information. He rarely spoke about them, and Diana knew almost nothing about his background. Eric nodded slowly, processing this information. Then he pointed to the silver bracelet among Diana's possessions. What's that? Diana's favorite piece of jewelry, I explained, picking it up. A charm bracelet our parents gave her for her 16th birthday. She wore it almost every day. I handed it to Eric, who examined the delicate silver chain with its small charms. A music note, a star, a tiny book, a heart. She was wearing it the day she came to tell me she was pregnant with you, I continued. She took it off the day you were born and left it for me to keep. She said someday it might help you understand who she was. Eric closed his hand around the bracelet, holding it tightly. For several minutes we sat in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. Finally, he looked up at me. His eyes filled with a complex mixture of emotions. I need more time, he said, to process all of this, to figure out how I feel about everything. Of course, I replied. Take all the time you need. Can I? He hesitated. Can I take these things with me? The letters, the photographs, her bracelet? I want to get to know her, in whatever way I can. They're yours, I said, tears filling my eyes. They always have been. As Eric gathered Diana's belongings, carefully placing them in a box Harold provided, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders, the burden of secrets kept too long. Whatever happened next, the truth was finally out in the open. The rest would be up to Eric. The weeks following our revelation passed in a strange limbo. Eric returned to Princeton to complete his final exams and graduate, maintaining minimal contact with us during that time. His texts were brief but not cold. Simple updates letting us know he was okay, that he was thinking things through, that he needed space but wasn't shutting us out completely. Harold and I attended his graduation ceremony, sitting proudly in the audience though unsure of our welcome. When Eric spotted us after receiving his diploma, he gave a small wave and smile. The first genuine smile I'd seen from him since before Mother's Day. It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was an acknowledgement. A beginning. Summer arrived, and with it came Eric's tentative steps back into our lives. He had accepted a job at a financial firm in New York City, starting in September. In the meantime, he was staying in a friend's apartment, sorting through his thoughts and feelings about the revelations that had changed his understanding of his identity. In late June, I received a text that made my heart skip. Would like to visit Diana's grave. Will you take me? Of course, I replied immediately. Whenever you're ready. We arranged to meet the following Saturday. I picked Eric up from the train station, both of us awkward but trying. The drive to the small cemetery was mostly silent, but not uncomfortably so. It was the silence of two people with too much to say, carefully choosing where to begin. "I've come here every year on your birthday," I said as we approached the cemetery gates. "September 12th. I would bring lilacs if they were in season. They were her favorite." Eric nodded, clutching a small bouquet of mixed flowers he had purchased at the station. I wasn't sure what to bring. "She would have loved anything you chose," I assured him. Diana's grave was simple. A modest headstone with her name, dates of birth and death, and the inscription "Beloved Sister, Forever Missed." I had chosen the wording carefully, honoring my relationship with her while keeping Eric's existence private as she had requested. Eric stood before the grave, silent and still. I remained a few steps behind, giving him this moment alone with the mother he had never known. After several minutes, he knelt and placed his bouquet at the base of the headstone. "I've been reading her letters," he said without turning around. "All of them. She was complicated." "Yes," I agreed. "Troubled but loving. Impulsive but genuine. She wrote about you a lot," Eric continued. "How you were always her protector. How you were the responsible one, the one who made good choices." I moved to stand beside him. We were very different but deeply connected. When she died, it felt like losing a part of myself. Eric looked up at me. "In one letter, she wrote that if she could choose anyone in the world to raise her child, it would be you. That she trusted you completely." Tears filled my eyes. "She never told me that. She also wrote that she hoped someday I would understand her choice," he said. "That giving me to you wasn't abandonment but the most loving decision she could make." "It was," I confirmed. "The most selfless thing she ever did." Eric stood, brushing grass from his knees. "I've been angry. At you, at Dad, at Diana, even at myself for not somehow knowing the truth. But the more I learn about her, the more I understand why things happened the way they did." "Understanding doesn't mean you can't still be angry," I said gently. "You have every right to your feelings, Eric." "I know," he acknowledged. "But I'm starting to see that everyone was trying to do what they thought was best, even if the decisions were flawed." We stood together at Diana's grave for a long time, sharing stories. I told him about Diana's childhood antics, her teenage rebellions, her beautiful singing voice. He listened intently, occasionally asking questions, building a picture of the woman who had given him life. As we finally turned to leave, Eric paused. "I'd like to come back here with you, on my birthday in September, to start a new tradition." "I'd like that very much," I replied, hope blooming in my heart. The summer progressed with small steps toward reconciliation. Eric came for dinner occasionally. He asked questions about Diana, about the adoption, about our decision to keep the truth from him. Sometimes the conversations were difficult, even painful, but always honest. In August, Eric asked to see his original birth certificate, the one naming Diana as his mother, the document we had legally superseded with Harold's connections. I had kept it locked away all these years, another secret finally brought to light. "Julian Reeves," Eric said, running his finger over his biological father's name. "At least now I know for certain." "We've tried to find information about him over the years," Harold admitted. "In case you ever asked. He appears to have left the music scene long ago. The last we heard, he was living somewhere in the Southwest." "I don't need to find him," Eric said, surprising us both. "Diana's story is enough for now. Maybe someday I'll be curious, but right now, I'm still processing everything else." September arrived, bringing with it Eric's 24th birthday and the anniversary of Diana's death. True to his word, he joined me at the cemetery. This time, we both brought lilacs specially ordered from a florist. "I've been wearing her bracelet," Eric told me as we stood before the grave. "Not all the time, just occasionally. It helps me feel connected to her somehow." "She would have liked that," I said. After leaving the cemetery, Eric asked to see the house where Diana had grown up, where I had grown up too. The current owners were kind enough to allow us a brief visit when I explained the circumstances. Eric walked through the room slowly, trying to imagine his mother as a child running down these hallways. A teenager sneaking out of that bedroom window. Thank you for bringing me here, he said as we left. For helping me know her. That evening, as we celebrated his birthday with a quiet dinner at home, Eric presented me with a small, wrapped package. It's not Mother's Day, he said, but I wanted you to have this. Inside was a silver photo frame containing 2 photographs side by side. On the left was Diana, holding newborn Eric in the hospital. On the right was me, reading to Eric when he was about 5 years old. Beneath the photos was an inscription. My mother's. Both of you made me who I am, Eric said quietly. Diana gave me life. You gave me a home and education, values, love. I needed time to understand that one doesn't negate the other. I held the frame to my chest, too moved to speak. I'm still processing everything, Eric continued. I probably will be for a long time. But I want you to know that I understand why you kept your promise to Diana. I understand the impossible position you were in. I've questioned that decision every day for 23 years, I admitted, wondering if we did the right thing. There was no perfect solution, Eric said with wisdom beyond his years. Just imperfect people trying their best in a complicated situation. The following May, nearly a year after the DNA test that had upended our lives, we celebrated Mother's Day again. This time when Eric handed me a gift bag, there was no accusation, no anger, no sense of betrayal. Inside was a journal with a note attached. For recording all the stories about Diana that you never got to tell me. So we can preserve her memory together. As I look back now at 68 on the journey we've taken, I realize that family is indeed about far more than biology. It's about love and choice and sacrifice. It's about honesty, even when that honesty comes decades late and at great cost. Diana gave me 2 precious gifts, her son to raise, and eventually the truth that set us all free. Eric has given me the gift of forgiveness and understanding. Together we've created a new kind of family. One built on honesty instead of secrets, acceptance instead of pretense. If you're watching this and carrying a family secret of your own, I hope our story gives you courage. The truth may be painful, even devastating at first, but it also opens the door to authentic connection. Have you experienced something similar in your own family? Share your story in the comments below. Sometimes sharing our burdens lightens them for everyone. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched you, please subscribe to hear more life experiences that remind us we're all just doing our best with the challenges we face. And remember, it's never too late for truth, for healing, for new beginnings. God bless you all.